Welcome. This is episode 13. We have talked about many things, matters education. Our aim really is to empower you as a parent so that you continually make informed decisions about your child's educational journey, which is a significant life stage for them. And so today we want to talk about just comparing. There are many choices. We talked about public school, private school, do you homeschool? There are all of those things that we talked about. And today we want to talk about the curriculum offering, the buffet. What's in the buffet in the education sector? What are you picking? What are the pros and cons of what you're picking? This is a very wide topic. We may not be able to to exhaustively cover it, so I'll sort of just brush on it a little bit, just to give you a rough comparison. So of course locally we have what we call the KBC. I know you're not familiar with it, you don't call it KBC, but KBC is actually what is commonly known as the 844 system, and KBC basically means knowledge-based curriculum. So knowledge, in pedagogy, education circles and practice, we talk about the taxonomies of learning, of knowledge. How do we know what we know? At what level do we know? How deep do we know? So there's a way that we measure goals in education and knowledge. So they talk about three domains of learning, or three areas in which learning affects us. So we have the knowledge domain, and when you think about the knowledge domain, you think about just information, and from a biblical perspective, one of the the verses that I think about when I think about knowledge is Romans, where it talks about faith coming by hearing. So you need to hear about something. When I ask you, how do you know what you know? There must have been a way in which you came to know what you know, and it's a basic of everything. The basic of what you're aware of is just knowledge. And then we talk about the heart. We talk about the affective domain. Okay, the affective domain. So we talk about the knowledge as a cognitive domain, that which affects our mind and our brain. And then we talk about the affective domain. And when you're talking about the affective domain, you're talking about values, the development of values. Then we talk about the psychomotor domain. And when you're talking about psychomotor domain, you're talking about skills. So we call those three the CAP, the domains of learning. Cognitive, when you think cognitive, think mind. Then we have affective. When you think affective, think hearts, values. And then we have what we call the psychomotor. And we talk about psychomotor, think about skills, things that you actually learn to do. And when learning is complete, it is supposed to impact, at the very base, it is supposed to impact, of course, your mind, what you know. And we talk about exposure. The higher you go in the learning journey, the more you are exposed to, the more your perspective about life and things and relationship widens, the more you just know, the better hopefully you become. Your values are shaped, your skills increase, and skills have to do with life skills. How do you take care of yourself? How do you become good at a profession or a vocation? So those domains talk about the goals of learning. They define the goals of all learning from the very elementary level to the highest levels of postgraduate. All that is there. And so really, at the very basic is knowledge. And 844 has been talked about as a knowledge-based curriculum. I was one of the very first, recipients or subjects of the 844 curriculum. And there's so many things that I learned about. I think that they call it the knowledge-based curriculum, but at the beginning, I think it actually developed certain competencies, because I learned how to bake, I learned how to, sew, I learned how to take care of a child. I remember in one of our home science lessons when I was in school was about, we were being taught how to wash a shirt. You begin with a collar. You just don't do, there's a way that you wash your collar, there's a way that you wash the cuffs. I mean, there was a lot of skill that was being imparted. I made a stool, I made a pajama bottom when I was in class 6. I made a blouse when I was in form 4. I made a menu, a meal plan, for how to take care of an invalid. And so I feel that at the beginning, 844 was a very good curriculum, and along the way, several factors have sort of transformed it into what we know now, what is called a knowledge-based curriculum. And it is called a knowledge-based curriculum because they say that its strength is in, cramming, cognitive level. Does it affect our values? No. Does it give us life skill? Not to the extent that we need to. And that I know is debatable. But anyway, long story, it's called knowledge-based curriculum. And so, because we were very dissatisfied with competence-based curriculum, now we have, knowledge-based curriculum, now we are talking about competence-based curriculum, where we are saying we want to recognize achievement along the education journey on various fronts, not just academics. Now we are told the noisemaker is a potential public speaker or a potential star in the laugh industry. So don't punish them. I mean, there are all of these thoughts that are evolving around competencies. Then, of course, we have the British National Curriculum, which is the curriculum that we inherited, after the colonial days. And then, of course, we have the American curriculum that is also growing a lot in our nation, and especially when it comes to going digital and all. There's a lot that is in the American curriculum. So what are the comparisons? Really, at the end of the day, in terms of general exposure to knowledge, I think that there are some basic things that all curricula cover. For example, if you take math, literacy, if you take numeracy, literacy is language, numeracy is math. When you take those two, which are like the core of every of the part of the core curricula, every system, wherever you go, I say math will remain math. The pie will remain the pie, whether you're in 844 American or British. So basic concepts are the same. They cover the same ground. One of the big differences, however, is content. There are some that are very narrow, very, prescriptive, and will not allow students, choice in terms of exploring. And I remember when we started, I think we did a lot of things, the original 844. We did so many subjects: art, music, crafts, agriculture. But these days they have narrowed down to a few. I can't keep track of how many they are. And then the British, also in terms of content, how do they arrange content? For example, I mentioned, I think earlier, that the culture, the American culture, in the American culture, people become adults at 16. That's when they become legal. A little later in our culture here, that is pretty much the British heritage. And then the American culture is a very DIY, do-it-yourself culture. So they are huge on skills, on the practicals. And it is so in places like Europe and Germany, they do a lot of skills development, which they say impacts them, the cognitive development and also the affective development of a child. So content is arranged differently. You may find that content, for example, in chemistry or physics that is being presented at high school level in one curricula is being presented in primary school. I'm a language teacher. Some of the things that I did at the university in linguistics, in the American curriculum that we offer at Almasi, is they actually begin to do those things from as early as grades 5, 6, and then it grows into high school. So assessment, so I said content is more or less the same. Curricula will have a wider offering, others will be more narrow in their offering. Arrangement, how do they arrange content in terms of sequence, what we call scope and sequence. What is the scope of your coverage in terms of a particular subject matter? What is the sequence of it? What will you teach after the other? What will come of the concepts? Which concept will be taught after the other? So that differs around the curricula. And then there is assessments. Some what we call conventional learning, which is teacher-led learning, is exam-based. So you teach, and then there is one time when your learning will be assessed and you will be assigned a performance level, grades. Okay, now so there is either the continuous assessment system or the exam-based system. So the American American curriculum that we offer at Almasi is there is no big exam that people do, but throughout your learning, you're constantly doing tests, you're constantly recording your performance, and at the end of an academic season, then we will compute your average performance during that season and assign you a mark that speaks about your competence in that particular area. And then, of course, there is methodology. How do we deliver learning? The two distinctives are teacher-based, teacher-driven, learner-based. So those are the two distinctives. In Kenya, when the teachers go on strike, the learning stops because our system is teacher-driven. In American, if the teacher goes on and the child has their books, they're able to continue, really. And so how do you choose as a parent? What do you consider? You have to ask yourself, what do I want to see of my child? For me, I want an education or a curriculum that instills in my child a love for learning that is lifelong, that they will be continual learning, they will be seeking knowledge for themselves, they'll be growing, they'll know how to find information for themselves, that you're training them for life. It's not just about the exam. There is holistic development. Take into consideration the values, the child's unique bent. What do they like? How are you developing that? How are you identifying that talent? How are you growing it? I'll leave you with a scripture in Luke 2:52. It talks about Jesus growing in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God and with man. I think that scripture talks about the 4 levels of competencies that any educational system should cover. Growing in wisdom talks about intellectual development, reasoning, critical thinking, being able to make decisions, growing in logical thinking. Stature talks about physical development, hitting the milestones, navigating them well. Schools should be able to help to monitor so that when there's a deficit, interventions can be made. Favor with God, spiritual development, knowing that you are connected with God, you came from somewhere, you're heading somewhere. Favor with man talks about relationships. At home, at school, in the society, you should be able, school should be able to deliver a child who is well-rounded in wisdom, in stature, favor with God, and favor with man. Thank you very much for keeping it here. My name is Sophia. I am the director and founder at Almasi School. We encourage you to call us on 0713-675-228 so that we can begin the conversation about how your child can grow in wisdom, in stature, in favor with God and with man. Check us out on our website www.almasischool.org. Thank you.